Hey y'all, and welcome back. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to check out another one of my videos, and welcome back to Kate's Giving. If you hear any little baby noises or hiccups, I have Sophia on my lap, and she's sleeping, but she has the hiccups, so you're gonna hear it every now and then in this video. But anyway, today, as you guys saw from the title, we're gonna do a fun video ranking all of my Nomad Cosmetics palettes. Now, when I initially put this down, I was like, oh yeah, Nomad, I must have, you know, probably between 5 and 10 palettes. I'm getting quite the collection. Well, I pulled them out this morning and sat there trying to rank them and realized I have 11 palettes from Nomad. Unless I'm missing one, which I've looked around my makeup table and I really hope I haven't overlooked one like I did when I ranked my Menagerie collection, which is smaller. You would think I wouldn't forget one, but I did, so that was super annoying. But anyway, we're going to be ranking all the palettes that I own from Nomad Cosmetics, and I'm just going to rank them from my least favorite all the way up to my most favorite, and we can talk about the palettes and catch up. Some of them I haven't touched in so very long, so it was fun to look back at and think back on all the looks that I created with them, and just kind of reminisce a little bit as I tried to figure out how to rank them. And I will tell you, oh my goodness, this ranking was very hard, because there are so many palettes from Nomad Cosmetics that are all just kind of like right there, like, oh, I love them all so equally, so trying to rank them and put one on in front of the other, I was just like, it was very difficult. So I did my best, and of course, as I always say with my ranking videos and when I'm ranking a palette, you know, it's mostly just how I feel at the present moment. It's not an exact science when it comes to me, so this video is mainly just for fun and just a chance to talk about my Nomad Cosmetics collection once again on my channel. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it as Sophia apparently falls deeper into sleep, because I don't think I've heard her hiccup in a minute or two. So of course, once I give the disclaimer at the beginning, she's like, oh, I'm done, I don't need a hiccup anymore, Mom. But anyway, let's dive into it. Alright, starting with the bottom of this countdown, the palette number 11, I had to go ahead and give it to the Nomad Cosmetics Lake Como palette. I think this was the very first palette I ever tried from them, so kind of funny that it comes in last. But the Lake Como palette, what I do still like the color story, at least the bottom 6 of the color story. The top one was a little bit boring for me. But while I still do appreciate the color story, the formula, I feel like, especially for the shimmers, has come such a long way that when I look in here and think about the shimmers and, you know, touch them and kind of reminisce about how they were, I'm not really super impressed, and I can definitely foresee myself decluttering this in the future, so I felt like it was appropriate for it to come in last. The mattes, however, are still really nice. They still are creamy, soft, and whatnot, but the shimmers have, I mean, I feel like Nomad has come such a long way. They've just changed their formula a lot, improved it, have a bunch of different type of formulas, and so the shimmers as a whole, I feel like, are a lot more impactful and special, kind of like what I have going on my eyes today. So much sparkle, so much beautiful just shimmer, so much intensity. It almost looks like a liquid sparkle on my eye. It's beautiful. So the shimmers have come such a long way that I'm gonna have to give the Lake Como palette to the very bottom of this, you know, ranking video. And also too, as I said, that this row right here, that was all the neutral row, I really never dipped into it. I didn't enjoy it. And then when I think about the other two rows, while they are very beautiful, I love a mix of blue and green. They have a lot of other palettes that we're gonna talk about soon that are also blue and green. So I enjoy them so much, I just opt for those. So this has to come in at number 11. Alright, next up for number 10 is going to be the Cartagena Magica palette. And this was a very fun palette that I really did enjoy the color story of. I just missed a little bit of intensity when it came to the matte, specifically depth. Like, there was a lot of light and bright with this palette, and I love a good orange, yellow, red type of palette, but the depth that I could get with this palette was really kind of slim to none. I mean, the deepest color is kind of that dark red on top, and it's not that dark. I mean, maybe if you're looking for a mid-tone dark, or you don't want anything too black, but when I'm talking about liking a deep outer corner, I like some like blackness, some depth in there, and I could not get it with this palette. And then also too, thinking about the shimmers, while they are very pretty, it only had really two type of formulas that were either very difficult to pick up and sparkly, or very, you know, easy to pick up and very subtle when it came to the sparkles. So as a whole, while thinking back to this palette, I do really like the looks that I got, and I love this color story. This is a palette I really only would prefer to dip in if I had something else to go with it. If I had another palette to go with it to give me depth. And for the shimmers too, while the shimmers are pretty enough, they're not terrible, they're just not my favorite, especially not my favorite Nomad type of shimmer in a palette. So I figured this could come in at number 10 for all those reasons, but it is a really nice pretty palette, and it is a good companion palette for me when it comes to really summer, orange, red, yellow type of palettes. It was very pretty. It just, I need a little bit more in there for me, especially as I've kind of grown over the years since trying this, because I think this came out last year or the year before last. It's been a little while, so it was a nice palette, but not my favorite, and they've come out with so many awesome palettes, especially this year, so many awesome palettes that it just doesn't stand up to those newer palettes. Okay, next up is going to be a discontinued palette. This is the Shanghai palette that Nomad launched, and let me show you the cover first. I'm working one-handed here. It looks like this, and then it opens in the very middle. to have kind of a two-sided kind of style to it. And I remember when I reviewed this, I loved the shimmers, but the mattes just were like a hard fail. Since more than half of the mattes in here were just kind of like that's kind of why I'm ranking it so low, just because while I think the shimmers are beautiful, I love this formula, and I've seen it a couple times in their palettes. They haven't done it a whole lot. I really do hope that they will do this more so, because there's something so beautiful and effortless about these. They're very sparkly. I say they're very shiny. Some have a lot of sparkle to it, but for the most part, they're super shiny and they have such intense color. They're easy to put on. They're so beautiful that I just love the simplicity, but the brightness when it came to the shimmers so much. So I keep hoping that they add more of these type of shimmers to their palettes. And like I said, I feel like I've seen it a couple times, but Nomad has a lot of different shimmers when it comes to their palettes as they launched, so that's why I kind of specified that. Sometimes I see them, but not all the time in their palettes. But anyway, the shimmers in here were absolutely beautiful. I love the color story as a whole. I just wish they had gone a lot more creative with the mattes. I love the green row, obviously, but if I wasn't wanting to do a green, you know, crease and green outer corner, or just, you know, a black and green, it was pretty limiting. I mean, I could get a gray look that was really pretty, but especially these brown colors, kind of these four up in here, they were all so similar and so very light that it was just kind of like, what's the point of using them? For me personally, maybe you love it, but for me personally, it just wasn't, there wasn't much of a point. So as a whole, there were aspects of this palette that I really, really liked, and then aspects of the palette that I really didn't like, which is kind of funny because it's, you know, the Shanghai Yin Yang palette. But anyway, for this ranking, I decided to place it right here because you can no longer get it. I only liked half the palette, and, you know, color story wise and interest wise when it came to being creative with the mattes was pretty darn limiting. So that's why I figured I would place it right here, because you guys know me, when it comes to eyeshadow palettes, I really like having fun with my mattes more so than shimmers, though I do enjoy a really good pretty shimmer. Next up is going to be what's on my eyes today, and it's the newest palette from Nomad Cosmetics. This is Santa's Village palette. I just recently launched it not too long ago on my channel. Look how beautiful this is. Oh my goodness, so beautiful. Such a gorgeous presentation. But anyway, I just recently posted my review of this, and as you can see, it's not getting super high. It is a 9-pan palette. They have a lot of larger palettes that have just so much more color story, but it is a 9-pan palette, which is why it's getting a little low. And then on top of that, when we're talking just about the mattes in this palette, there's a black, there's a gray, and there's a very, very light white, almost like light, a touch lighter than my skin tone, and a red. And for creativity and being able to create a lot of different type of looks, it's pretty limiting for me personally. So that's something I think about when I'm looking at these palettes. And then on top of that, the shimmers, while they are beautiful, like I said, what's on my eyes is absolutely beautiful, very, very stunning. It is a type of formula that I'm not the biggest fan of working with. It's very difficult to pick up. It's a little bit like flaky-ish, though like a flat flaky. The best way to apply this is with your finger. I just don't prefer to apply it with my finger, if you know what I mean, but they are very beautiful. There's no denying that once you put these on your eyes, they are stunning. They're just so intense, so gorgeous. So I get the appeal for these type of shadows, but just in working with them and knowing my preference, like I said, I enjoy working with the mattes. I enjoy having fun and being creative with the different type of mattes that I blend together. And for my shimmer, I just like nice pigmented color and a little sparkle and maybe metallic finish to it, and I'm pretty happy. So with these, if you're someone who likes tons of sparkle, all the shifts, something that just looks like wet, you know, almost like a wet sparkle on your eyes, you'll like this type of formula. But for me personally, it just doesn't rank very high in my priorities and like what I like to see in a palette. So that's the biggest reason why it's getting low. But if you like the color story when it comes to the mattes and like what you like to work with, and you like all the shifty beautifulness that these shimmers give you, which if you haven't seen the shifts that these shimmers give you, definitely check out my review video and see them in action on my eyes. But they are very beautiful. There is a ton of shift and a ton of just intensity and beautifulness to this palette, but they've come out with a lot of awesome palettes, as I've said, so I couldn't rank this one super high. Okay, next up is going to be the Iceland Fire and Ice palette. This was, I think, the very first palette that I just kind of fell in love with when it came to Nomad Cosmetics, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. But I remember enjoying this palette so very much because I loved the warm and cool tone aspect of this palette. It was so very fun to create looks. Like, I could stick to the cool tone side of it, I could just embrace the warm tones in it, or I can mix and match, which you guys know I love to mix and match. And I really enjoyed the looks that I got when I was mixing and matching the warm and cool of this palette together. The shimmers also, some of them were more of a subtle type of shimmer, but some of them were really pretty, had a little more impact to it, and also a lot of them had just had so much sparkle to it. It was very, very pretty. So I have a lot of good memories when I think back on this palette and the color story, and just like I said, this was a palette that was like, okay, Matte formula for a Nomad is always A++, always so good, and I just love this color story. It was so fun. I love the presentation of like the ice and then the fire on the inside. I just thought they did such a great job, and this is really what just drew me into Nomad as a brand, and just really enjoying their formula, enjoying their concepts, enjoying their palettes, all that sort of thing. So has a lot of special memories for me, so I had to place it a little bit high, but like I said, they've come out with a lot of awesome palettes recently, so I couldn't rank it that high, but it's still a fantastic palette. I don't think I've said this yet, but all of the palettes that I'm talking about from Nomad Cosmetics, matte quality is never an issue. Like, all of them have amazing matte quality, and then the shimmers, as I've been telling you, are either really good or just not my favorite, but for the most part, most palettes I really do like, and it's just, this ranking is just preference. Let's talk about the palette that launched earlier this year when I was actually pregnant with Sophia. I was so sick when this launched. I was trying so hard to get a 3 looks, 1 palette review video. Let me go ahead and just show you guys because she is sleeping so peacefully. She is out. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so crazy to think how time has flown because, like I said, I was so sick, so miserable when this palette launched. But anyway, let's talk about the palette. I decided to rank it kind of right here in the middle because I really do like the tones in this palette. I love the rich blues. I love those greens in there as well. These shimmers in this palette were also really pretty. I remember really enjoying the shiftiness of a couple of them, and especially Berry Cool, this gold was so pretty. It really did look like liquid on your eyes. It was stunning and gorgeous. But when I'm talking about the other palettes that we're going to talk about here soon, the color story in here was just a little bit limiting with how they set it up, with kind of having a really light green, a dark green, a really light blue, a dark blue, and then the kind of black. I do appreciate the depth that I could get with this palette, absolutely. I like that they had really light tones along with really dark tones. The looks that I got were amazing, but as we're going to talk about their other palettes, I just like them a little bit more, so I had to put this one right here, kind of in the middle, kind of higher in the middle. It's not on the bottom of the countdown, but definitely it's a nice palette. If you like the colors in here, it's a great palette. I really did enjoy it, and yeah, it was, I think, my first time trying one, you know, their duochromes in a palette, if I remember right. Ski Bum and a Powder Specialist, which I know you guys can't read the titles, but it's that white one right there, and then this one right here. Those 2 shades are really, really pretty. I do have a video up on my channel if you are curious at all to see them in action, but I think this was the first palette that they'd put duochromes in, and they did a good job, and I've continued to improve because, like I said, what's on my eyes, they are duochrome, and they do give a shift, and they're very, very beautiful. So anyway, really nice palette. Had to land it kind of right here in the middle. This palette is such a fun one. This is the America's Parks palette, and I mentioned this as a favorite kind of neutral palette for me recently when I did my top 10 neutral palettes, and I know it's a very colorful, even if you can call it neutral, it's a very colorful palette, but I think the aspect of me that whenever I created looks, it just felt very neutral to me was because it is so earthy toned with, you know, being themed around America's Parks, being themed around nature so much, is that, and all the looks that I got just made me think of that kind of fall, naturey, kind of going on a hike type of look, and that just makes me think of neutral, nature, neutral. I don't know. I named it as one of my top 10 neutrals, and it is a really great palette. I really did enjoy it. This is the first time Nomad put marbled eyeshadows in there, and I was kind of curious if I would like it. I was pleasantly surprised to see that I did like it. I thought they were just fine. And the shimmers as a whole, I remember really enjoying the shimmers in here. Easy, smooth, beautiful, shimmery, sparkly, all the good things. And of course the mattes are just absolutely beautiful. I love the mix of the green with the purple, the brown, and yellow and orange. I just love those type of tones when it comes to blending them out on my eyes. So as a whole, this palette is a little shimmer heavy for me, which you guys know I tend to like, you know, mattes, playing with mattes more so than shimmers. So as far as like all their palettes as a whole and ranking them, maybe not my top favorite because of that, and it is also more of a neutral palette, and I'm into color, and you guys know that. But I do enjoy a neutral look, so it got pretty high in my ranking, but we're gonna talk about some other palettes here soon that just blew my socks off, and I had to give them a higher spot than this. But even though I'm not giving this the highest spot, it's still is a fantastic palette. If you like more earthy tones, this is a great palette to get. Next up is going to be Nomad Fetes de Provence palette. This palette took me by surprise with how much I loved it, because looking at this color story, I totally expect to be like, oh, okay, I'll review it. I'm sure the quality is going to be good, but it's not going to be my favorite because it's mostly pink and purple. Yes, there's some yellow in there to kind of draw me in because you guys know I love yellow, but as a whole, it's just not my type of color story. However, I think I created over 7 looks. The video I did was 7 looks, and then I think I used it a couple more times. I created a lot of looks with this palette, and I ended up loving like every single one of them. None of them were super bright and loud, but they all had kind of like a dusty kind of gray tone to them, a grayish vibe to them, a cool tone, kind of soft vibe to them, but you still got depth in there with that dark shade on the end that I just absolutely loved it. And I was so surprised about how much I loved it. Another aspect that I love about this palette is that I enjoyed mixing and matching the rose together, kind of the yellow with the purple, the yellow with the pink, the pinks and purples together, the pinks and gray tones together, that type of thing. You guys know I like to be creative with my makeup, and getting to combine different colors into one eye look is something I always really enjoy. So this really, I was able to do that a lot with this palette, just the way it was set up. It was so easy and effortless. Also that middle yellow shimmer shade, oh my goodness, so beautiful. Let's see, out of the 5 shimmers in this palette, the yellow all the way over to that gray, they were my favorite type of shimmer formula from Nomad Cosmetics. A little bit maybe tricky to pick up, but they're so beautiful on the eyes. They're not that hard to get to apply onto your eyes. You don't have to use your finger, that type of thing, and they're just stunning. And then the other 2s, not that they're bad, they're just more of a subtle type of shimmer, nothing as intense and just beautiful on the eyes as the other 3. So as a whole, this palette has such special memories for me, and it was so unexpected with how much I enjoyed this that's really why I had to place this so high, just because, like I said, I have such special memories. I enjoyed it so much that it surprised me I had to give it a high ranking. Okay, I had to give this one a high ranking. This is the Nomad Hudson Valley palette. It's a newer palette that they came out, but the depth that you get with this palette, I just love so much. It's definitely very neutral. Very neutral. I totally get that. Looking at this, you're like, Katie, half that palette is kind of very neutral. I thought you don't like neutral looks. But there's something about these tones. They're my type of neutral palette. They just are my favorite to play with. And even though it's, you know, kind of looking at it, it's very neutral leaning, especially if you cover up that red, you can get a lot of very pretty, colorful, yes, fall. You got that depth in there, you got that kind of neutral dip in there, but you can get some pretty bright fall looks, and I love that. The apple picking, that red shade is so bright and so intense. It stains like crazy, but it is a very intense and beautiful red, and I absolutely love it. The shimmers in here, there's only 3 in here. They're beautiful, and you guys know I like playing with mattes, so I love that the aspect of this palette, just getting, I was able to play so much with the mattes and kind of how I blended them in, how I wanted to do them. They're so buttery smooth. They all blend so well together. There's so much depth in here that it's a great palette, and it's a neutral palette that I absolutely love. It will absolutely be in my updated top 10 neutral palettes, because this is my type of neutral for sure. And I know this is more of a neutral than the America's Parks palette. I totally get that. And like I said, this is definitely my type of tones when it comes to a neutral palette, so I'll definitely be including it in that one. But yeah, as a whole, I just love the tones in here. I love the packaging as well. These are my favorite type of tones. These are the colors that I like to decorate my house in all year long. Like, that's how much I love these tones. So this palette just has such a special place in my heart of just being my kind of, I guess you say, vibe when it comes to my aesthetic and like what I like to wear, what I like to decorate in, that type of thing. So this had to get high. The quality of these are so nice. The shimmers in here are so nice. Definitely do like them. Definitely do recommend it, and it definitely had to get high in my countdown. All right, next up is going to be the Nomad, obviously Nomad, but this is going to be the Paradise Islands palette. This palette is such a fun one. This one came out, I think, as summer was ending, or spring was ending and it was going into summer. And I remember reviewing this saying, this isn't super summery to me. This is definitely a spring themed palette, because you couldn't get a whole lot of depth, and all the colors were such a brightness that they kind of had a pastel lean to them when you were creating looks. So I named this as one of my top 10 spring palettes for this year, and I still stand by that. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Perfect palette for me for spring. Love it so much. The shimmers in here, there's a couple different varieties of them, but the blue and the like lime green are very intense. My favorite type of shimmer. They're so beautiful. They're almost metallic on the eyes, easy to go on, beautiful. And the other shimmers are very sparkly as well. 1 or 2 are a little bit more subtle in nature, but as a whole, very pretty. I love the shimmer orange in here as well. And yeah, as a whole, even though you can't get super dark, there is still that green and that blue to give you some depth, and that was a lot of fun. And it was just such a fun palette to, you know, have fun with and create a lot of really pastel leaning type of looks, very springy for me type of looks. And yeah, it was just a great palette, and I really did enjoy it. A couple shades were a little bit too light for me. You know, some of the shimmers, kind of like Whale, it made a great inner corner, but it was a bit light. And then I think this shade and then this shade was a little bit light, but they worked well within looks and whatnot. They just weren't the standout for the palette, I suppose you could say, as well as this shade over here, Sky. Trying to hold a baby and do this. I really should lay her down, but at this point I'm almost done with this video, so I'm gonna finish this video and then I'll lay her down. Anyway, it's a great palette. I really did enjoy it. It's a fun color story, perfect for spring, perfect for the as the weather's warming up, and it was just a fun palette to try this spring. So definitely had to rank it pretty high. I love the lime green corner of this palette. That was definitely my favorite, and that's definitely one of the reasons it's ranking pretty high. Lime green. I'm such a sucker for a good lime green. I love it so much. So had to rank pretty high in my countdown. It was really hard to pick my top #1 palette, but I had to give it to the this is the Cloud Forest, Monteverde Cloud Forest. I can't really pronounce it properly here on the palette, but this palette right here, and I love it so much, I had to give it number 1. This is the palette that launched right before my little girl was born. I think the day before she was born, I forget. I created 10 looks with this palette. It is on my channel if you're curious, but I had to give this number 1 because the mattes in here are so intense, so bright. You can have so much fun. So much fun with this palette. So bright when it comes to all the different colors in here. And then the shimmers, all of them I really liked. Lots of them were leaning on the green side of things, so I think that's why I liked it so much. But as a whole, I mean, there's different type of formulas of shimmers within here. Some are easier to pick up, some are harder to pick up, some are more metallic leaning, some are more sparkly leaning. However, each one of the colors in here I absolutely loved. And as you can see, there also are more mattes than shimmers. I always love a palette that has more colorful mattes than shimmers. So as a whole, there's just really nothing that I don't like about this palette. So I figured when I was looking through these palettes, I was like, I gotta give this number 1. I absolutely love it as a whole. And also another aspect that I love about it is it can really, you know, give me the colorful side of my eye looks that I love to explore. You guys know I love to go very bright and bold with my eye looks, but also there are those shades in here where I can go pretty subdued, still with a lot of sparkle, but I can get more neutral, not so loud looks, especially leaning with the browns and the greens in this palette and maybe staying away from the very bright, kind of bold, almost neon colors. So I think that's why this one is just claims number 1. While there's so many amazing palettes that I've already talked about, this palette just kind of all encompasses, gives me everything I like with an eye look, and yeah, it's just such a good palette. I love the variety. It's a bigger palette, more options, more colors. The shimmers I absolutely love. Had to give this one number 1. I enjoyed it so much, and if you want some inspiration, like I said, I created 10 looks with this palette. You can find that video down in the description box. Alright, so that is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it as always, and I hope it wasn't too awkward me trying to hold it one hand here. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my ranking of the Nomad Cosmetics palettes that I own. I know there's other palettes that they've launched that I just don't own, but these are all the ones I still have in my collection, so I wanted to go ahead and rank them for you guys in this video. And let me know which palettes from Nomad Cosmetics you have, or if you have a big collection of them like I do. What's your top 3? Let me know your top 3 down below in the comments. I'd love to hear that. And yeah, with that said, I'm gonna go put this sleeping little angel to sleep now, and hopefully, or to bed I should say, she's already sleeping. But I'm gonna go put her to bed. Hopefully she'll stay asleep. And yeah, I'll see you guys very soon in my next video, hopefully tomorrow. Bye guys.